Hello and welcome to Happy Times and Places, a positively inclined Doctor Who episode commentary podcast in which I, Toby Haydock, watch a Doctor Who story chosen by a friend of mine. I commentate along, drop in facts and observations, and try to guess what my special guest's favourite thing about each instalment might be.
Hi Toby, my name is Simon Curtis and the story I have for you to watch is from Season 8 and is Colony in Space.
Welcome to this episode of Happy Times and Places, which follows on from last week's, which I had to do twice because of various technological failings. It was almost like I'd put all technology beside me and decided to live on a planet where nothing worked. And this week I find myself in the shadow of I'm not going to blame technical incompetence, apart from perhaps the wiring in my brain, because I left my laptop and satchel on a train. So I'm currently doing this on Shirley's equipment before going to pick, hopefully, mine up from lost property at Waterloo Station tomorrow. But the week has been therefore quite a palaver. So I would quite happily actually put all modern things beside me and just behind me and go and live on some good life planet. The planet Good Life is Exalius, isn't it? Because this modern world is too stressful for me. Anyway, I think I was luckier than I might have been. I don't know exactly. The bag is there. I don't know if the laptop is inside it, but fingers crossed, let's hope so. But what an idiot. But also somebody, I think, hopefully, if everything's in there, found it on the train and handed it in. So, I mean, I don't know the exact circumstances. It could have been that somebody found it, took the laptop out and then threw it, and then somebody else picked it up and handed it in. I don't know. But let's assume it's the good story for the good life, for the planet Good Life, and that there is actually more good in the world than we might think, and not everybody is an evil capitalist mining corporation out for itself, but therefore I'm slightly compromised. I do feel this system I'm on is not one I'm familiar with. It's slightly jerry-built. You know, it's weird, isn't it, when you have your own machine and your own way of doing things and everything's where you want it, and suddenly you're doing something on something else. It never feels quite right. So it feels like a lash-up to me, even though it's perfectly normal and all. It's just not the one I'm used to. So I do feel it's a bit like I'm on the colony in space with everything just hanging together by a thread, and it could break at any moment. But let us see what the comments have been from the patrons on Episode 3 of Colony in Space, where they're responding to Episode 3's commentary and looking forward to Episode 4. There's a couple of them being nice about me, so we won't read those out. But thank you, David and Jasper and Jason. David Gillespie Pratt says, one of the things my other half loves doing when watching Doctor Who of this period is spotting props the BBC bought from Century 21, the production company behind the Jerry and Sylvia Anderson series. Usually we'll spot various consoles and props and lamps from Space 1999, but in Colony in Space, it's the IMC spaceship that's the standout reused prop, having been previously used in the Joe 90 episode Talk Down. Well, there we are. Isn't that exciting? So that's the spaceship, the IMC spaceship. Oh, so that we've already seen that. I was thinking of the Arbitrator spaceship. He's not called the Arbitrator, whatever he's called. We'll meet him in this episode coming up. No spoilers. Jasper says, thanks for pointing that out, David. And of course, one of the colonists is wearing, I think I pointed out, didn't I, a spacesuit belonging to an ambassador of death. It's quite fun seeing recycled things. There's a Galaxy 4 gun, isn't there, in Destiny of the Daleks, and sort of like it's all recycling, isn't it? Very good for the environment. Very good for this green story on the planet Good Life. It's all apposite. It's all about using what you've got and making it last. And in this disposable society that we live in, I mean, you can dispose of stuff just by leaving it on a train, but let's not get into that. Let's not fixate on that, Toby. Onwards into space. Jasper says, I couldn't agree more about the characters and the actors, including Roger Delgado. The characters and the actors, including Roger Delgado, make this story, and I'm always here for some celebration of Malcolm Hulke. In fact, this episode reminded me that I hadn't yet ordered Michael Herbert's book about Hulke, which I'd been meaning to do for ages. it is now safely on its way. Well, Michael hangs around these here parts, so he'll be delighted to hear that, and he'll be delighted to hear that Frank Shales adds, "That's a wonderful book." John Hall adds, "That book is currently on my pile, or should I say nearest pile, of books to read one day." Yes, one day. We've all got piles. Well, it's just because we're men of a certain age. But yes, we've all got piles. I've got piles of books. I actually did read a book when I was away. One, I'd intended to read more. Jasper says, "This prompted me to check on my order station. I found it's still quite some time away. It's like waiting for the Season 7 Blu-ray all over again. Well, it'll be worth it when you get it, Jasper." Jason Thompson says, responding to Nev's comment about recurring actors. Oh yes, tune in to last week, so I don't have to explain. It's about stories, he said, then explaining it. It's any stories with more actors who'd been in Doctor Who before or since than this one, it scores very highly. Jason says, "I did a massive Twitter thread on this very subject a couple of years ago, and I still have the spreadsheet I made for it, so I popped back to check. Why, yes, I do have too much time on my hands. Why'd you ask? As you said last time, credited cast members only. Colony in Space is not on the top spot, but it's not far off. By my count, it has 15 credited cast, who either had been or would later be in other stories, playing other roles. So, what could beat that? Yes, because uncredited, actually, Stanley Mason is one of the priests, and he's Bok imminently, and Antonia Moss is also one of the priests, and she is one of the Tribe of Gum in An Unearthly Child, but they don't count because they are not credited cast, and it's a slightly different system, and you just go crazy if you start doing all of that. Well, as you said before, simply by virtue of their length and range of characters, the top two are the Daleks' Master Plan, with 22, including Jean Marsh, or 23 if you include Peter Purvis, since he'd been Morton Dill just before being Stephen Taylor, after all, and the War Games with 19. Sea Devils just tops Colony with 17. So Sea Devils does pretty well considering it's only 6 episodes. John Hall adds, "I'd include Peter Purvis on that list, just as I'd also include Lalla Ward." Where's that job? Oh, I've hid that reply. Lalla Ward, Colin Baker, Freema Agyeman, Karen Gillan, Peter Capaldi, and so on in such lists. Yes, because they played a different character. It's not like they're a returning regular. I am with you on that, John. Jason, so that's pretty good. So Jason had a spreadsheet. I was off the top of my head, but I mean, I think it's a fairly safe and educated guess, isn't it? Daleks' Master Plan and War Games. And Sea Devils. Right, Sea Devils beats Colony. Okay, that does pretty well. Jason Thompson, looking ahead to episode 4, the alien city has one of my biggest sci-fi pet peeves: ridiculously shaped doors. These ones open to leave a pointy bit sticking out to the corridor and a random gap in the wall. Worse, that pointy bit at the bottom is just the right height to smack the almost blind alien priests in the face. See also the doors on Klingon ships in various Star Trek series and films that have a strange sticky out bit that remains in the doorway even when they open fully. And looking still further ahead, your professional suicide cliffhanger might not have been the most exciting, but it would still be better than the Bakewell Tart of Doom that we have to look forward to in a couple of episodes' time. Spoilers! Frank Shale says, "I wonder if Matt Smith's Jammy Dodger, which threatened the Daleks, was a tribute to Delgado's Bakewell Tart. It almost certainly wasn't, Frank, but I like the way you work in there." Adam Park, I know you didn't really mean that it was, Frank. You were doing one of them jokes. But it would be nice to have that sort of continuity, wouldn't it? The Bakewell Tart and a Jammy, Jammy Dodger's a biscuit. So Bakewell Tart, you are mixing your genres of sweet snack there. Adam Parkin says, "Toby, we may not have voluminous 70s locks." So this is on the hair, the shocking hair that is part and parcel of the look of Colony in Space, but at least we don't have dubious 70s comb-overs. No, indeed, they were very much a thing, and I think if you told kids today, and I'm sure some young people are listening, but yes, men used to disguise the fact they had no hair on their head by growing the scant hair that they did have and sort of pasting it on the bald bit as if to pretend they weren't bald, and a gust of wind would lift it off. Oh dear, dear, dear. I'm sure I've mentioned this before. It's always amused me that Peter Miles, that's what very much Peter Miles in Doctor Who and the Silurians, that it always amused me that Peter Miles had more hair in the making of documentary made 20 odd years later than he did in the clip that it then cut to of him. Legnog says, I'd completely forgot my pseudonym, so hearing you say hello Legnog was a delight. Well, hello again, Legnog. Nick Jocelyn Mellish, hi Nick. The biggest surprise with the novelisation for me was that the thing people criticise the story for, a lot of perceived padding with gunfights and going to and fro, remain intact. Maybe it shows that Hulk was fond of this and felt it had a purpose, or perhaps he was just staying true to his finished script. Well, he doesn't though, does he, stay true to the finished script? He does add loads of bits and bobs. So maybe just the story is, maybe he just thought that was drama. Shane Plays says, we need a Doctor Who story where it turns out all the magnificent moustaches are actually parasitic alien life forms forcing both sides to fight in a grand scheme full of evil bidding. Doctor Who and the upper lip follicles of doom. Yeah, well, I like to think that I mean, evil moustaches is something that Doctor Who hasn't done yet, and I wouldn't be against it. Sarah Krotzer says, this is the very definition of an episode that keeps the story on simmer. We're talking episode 3. Do tune into last week's. Not a lot going on, although I'm always impressed by the sheer number of defined, distinct secondary characters in a Hulk story. Yes, indeed, Sarah, I think you're bang on there. Unlike many Pertwees where you get a couple of colourful guest roles and some generic soldiers. Regardless, it will be nice to see the Adjudicator go off like a grenade and take the story to another level. Well, yes, indeed, we will see that very shortly. Philip Marsh says, your comments about the waspishness of the Third Doctor made me reflect on why it is that I like this quality in him in Season 7, but I find him a bore in Season 8. I think it's to do with the letsification of the show. In Season 7, the general tone is more adult, so interpersonal conflict feels less out of place than in Letz's softer, more family-friendly tone. Also, he tends to be rude during stressful situations, when it feels more natural. But perhaps more than that, in Season 7 the Doctor is surrounded by strong characters who are more than capable of giving as good as they get. The pre-comic relief Brigadier, Liz Shaw, Ralph Cornish, etc. are all able to put the Doctor back in his box and even force him to recognise he is being unreasonable. But in Season 8, that isn't the case. Joe Grant lacks Liz's ability to meet the Doctor head-to-head, and the likes of Captain Yates couldn't clap back at him even if they wanted to, due to Army protocol, something the Doctor surely knows, making his sniping feel more like bullying. By Season 19, he has his moments of testiness, but by and large it's been toned down enough to fit with Letz's vision of the show. That's very interesting points there, Philip. Yeah. I mean, as I said, I don't know why I suppose because, I didn't fixate so much on the Doctor's testing. I suppose, like a lot of bits, I just ignore the bits of Doctor Who that I don't like. So the Doctor being a bit of an arse was sort of overshadowed by Pertwee's natural flamboyance and authority and all of that. But I can see, so I can see why people don't like that aspect of him. Probably more than I can see why he's people's favourite Doctor, but a lot of people I really like and whose opinions I value, Pertwee is their favourite Doctor, and not just people who grew up with him. And I've never been able to see that. I think he looks, at first sight, absolutely like a Doctor, and I think he's good at various. But I think he was good casting, and I think he's casting, a comic in his first proper dramatic role, and all of that. It really pays off, but he's not as strong a Doctor. He's not as strong an actor, for starters, I think, as the two Doctors that surround him. But I can also see why people have problems with those Doctors. But I don't see what it is about Pertwee that elevates him, I think, above the more natural sort of alien eccentrics. But interesting. Sarah says, so maybe his testiness and grumpiness and unpleasantness has impacted my enjoyment of him more than I might have noticed. Interesting. Sarah Krotzer responds to Philip. Hello again, Sarah. This is your second one on this. Good. He snaps at Joe in both the mind of evil and the demons at a level that is completely inappropriate, says Sarah. It's quite hard to watch him punch down like that, unlike all the times he similarly punctures the egos of government bureaucrats and obsessed scientists in Season 7 and 8. He's an asshole then, too, but in the most cathartic way. So yes, but that's interesting, isn't it? It Punch Down, I think, is very good there, Sarah, in the fact that he's kind of it's all right to bite your thumb at authority, but if you patronise and belittle and undermine your companion, you're not a lot of fun. And when Tom Baker gets like that, he's got a bit more sort of alien detachment about it, so it seems less bullying and less personal. Jasper comes in to add, the demons is one that really stuck in my mind. I swear the Doctor says something stern to Jo about the Brigadier being her commanding officer or something like that, and I was just like, who are you? Yeah, that is a horrible bit, actually. It's just I won't use the word that I want to use. I think you're right, Philip, about settling down in season 9, continues Jasper. I think he also starts to get more used to Jo and willing to put the effort into teaching her. She may not have as much knowledge as Liz, but she's more than willing to learn and capable of doing so as well. I wonder if the Doctor spent the whole of season 8 grumpy about Liz leaving him for academia and took it out on poor Jo. Yeah, maybe. John Hall is back. John says, there was a lot of John here. My favourite thing about this is episode 3, is the mucky clay fight pit between Winton and the IMC chap. Both men end up absolutely soaked and caked in the stuff in a sequence that I'd like to think inspired that epic cat fights between Joan Collins and Linda Evans in Dynasty, or I remember watching Dynasty. But Winton has a bit of a roll around in the clay in this episode, John, but it's not that he has the fight later. Again, another sort of repetitive element, but poor old Nicholas Pennell must have got very cold. John adds, I have a feeling my memory is cheated and placed the above scene in this episode rather than the later one, episode 6, where it actually takes place. Well, I won't have you shot now, John. John says, I suspect my memory is cheated. Oh, he's done that twice. How appropriate to have put this one. He's replied to his own message and then he's given it an independent release as well. But it's Colony in Space. A bit of repetition is perfectly in keeping with the surroundings. Susie Ferguson, I hope you had a handlebar moustache and beige slacks on while you were doing it, John. Susie Ferguson says, I agree with your choice for this episode, but boy, do I feel stupid for not realising that guard was Caldwell. I think I've come accustomed to bleaker TV shows, because when Winton climbs up that hill only to run into another guard, I thought, oh, that's him gone. What a shame for him after all that. Or maybe I just wasn't paying enough attention. No, I think maybe the misdirect of the direction and the quality of the acting and everything meant that there was an element of doubt, and I think that's quite right. I think that element of doubt is there deliberately, and of course, the picture isn't clear now. Whether the picture would have been clearer back in the day, I don't know. But certainly from here, it's not 100% that it's Caldwell. That's why they show the boots even after you've seen the guy full length and his moustache. But there's a lot of moustaches, and you don't really see him properly until the guards have gone and you get the close-up. So I don't think Susie, I don't think you've been daft. I think that's absolutely bang on. That was what the director and possibly even the writer intended. So though, that's good. And it helps me with my case for it being the episode's best bit. Richard Bignell. We love a bit of biggers. Oh, and actually, he sent me an email too, which is going to be very useful because it will have some facts in it. But Richard says my favourite part of the episode, the lovely clear shot you get of the IMC corridor and the fact that they have a whacking great notice board on the wall, a sleek spaceship complete with an office corkboard and bits of paper held up with drawing pins, including what appears to be 2 pages of the script. Ha 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 ha. Well, yes, fair enough. And I did put the Lost Colony in 3 on Happy Times and Places on the Patreon, and Philip Marsh has put his comment there as well, and Jonathan Evans has said, an absolute joy for the Harry Andrews anecdote alone, which I'd completely forgotten I'd done. So if not that the rest wasn't a joy too, because the original Colony 3 is the Lost Colony. Something went wrong with my technology, and so I had to redo it. But the bit that I'd saved, which was the sort of last 2/3, maybe a good chunk, but I didn't want to lie and sort of do all the lead in and then knit it together and pretend it was all done at the same time, so I just redid the whole thing. But I think, almost prefer my original go because it was fresher. And obviously it has a hilarious Harry Andrews anecdote, but I put that out on Patreon. So again, I don't do this often, but for once I'm going to not wait until the end to plug Patreon. That is where you can go to support these releases and make them continue to be ad-free for everybody, but also get advanced releases and exclusives and all sorts of other goodies for as little as £3 a month, which I think is fairly reasonable. And at the moment, I'm absolutely skint for various reasons. So the more I have coming in as a result of quite hefty output on Patreonville. I try and do 3 things a week. The poor sod's got an old play of mine this week because I haven't been able to work on my computer. But for £3 a month, I don't think that's too bad. But only, of course, if you like what I do. If you think I'm the most tedious man on earth, it's a total rip-off. But then again, if you think I'm the most tedious man on earth and you've got 20 minutes into this podcast that purports to be about Colony in Space 4, even though I haven't started watching it yet, I think you're lying to yourself. You love me. Right, now then, I'm just going to my email inbox because I remember getting an email from Richard Bignell. I'm going to tease you now because I've got emails here from Russell Minton and from Stuart, who's in charge of the BBC Blu-ray range, from Stuart Manning, the publisher of my Quatermass book, from my agent, Carolyn Cutler, not with a job, unfortunately, but that's okay. It's still a nice note. But here we have Richard Bignell has sent me an email entitled Pertwee's Nose, because I'd remembered there was a poster from Colony in Space of the Doctor being loomed over. It's from the point of view, isn't it, of the IMC mining machine and him looking imperiled. And I knew that Pertwee had complained about it. Richard and I waffled, and I don't think I was exact, but that's all right because Richard was a listening, and he is on hand to send the actual truth, which is relating to your Happy Times and Places comments on I think episode 2 of Colony. Here's the paperwork concerning the Colony poster and Pertwee's snoz. He certainly had an issue about his nose, indicated by Ronnie Marsh, concerning the 1973 annual, which World Distributors did nothing about, and a year later Barry Letts over the cover of the Auton Invasion, which W.H. Allen did nothing about. Actually, the issue with the Colony poster wasn't to do with his nose. Okay, so his nose problem was the 1973 annual and the cover of the Autumn Invasion. Okay, I knew he had a thing about his nose, which is why they take the piss out of it in Terrence Dix takes, because I think he says he wrote the line about a long-shanked rascal with a mighty nose, and of course Tom Baker saying the nose is a definite improvement. Poor old, I think he could go for bullying in the workplace, Pertwee. He was self-conscious about his nose, so they rub it in at every moment they can. Actually, the issue with the Colony poster wasn't to do with his nose, but rather Pertwee thought, 1, that the Doctor was shown being scared, not heroic, and 2, he thought the photo made him look old, and I'm surprised Terrence Dix didn't go, a long-shanked, ancient-looking rascal with a mighty nose, and 3, he didn't get any credit on it. Might be able to shoehorn that lot in somewhere. Well, I'm not doing it with any artfulness at all. I haven't even shoehorned it. I've just been blatant about it. So it's right. It's not the poster, because there is a shot where he's sort of crawling back along the floor, and I thought it was that, and that's why maybe I was worried about his nostrils. It's the one with the claw in the top left, and him sort of beneath it, looking up at it with his arms up. So it's not actually the poster I was thinking of, but Richard's kindly included the poster. So Sue Jones, assistant to Anthony Hayes. Dear Mr. Leagood, further to sending Mr. Pertwee a copy of the above poster, I enclose here with a copy of his letter to us, which clearly states his views. As Tony Hayes is on holiday this week, I would appreciate if you could telephone me so that we could discuss this matter. So this is to Charles Leagood of BBC Publications from Richard Stone Agents, and that's Richard Stone, an important actors agency until relatively recently, actually. I don't know if they're still going. I don't think they were. They were 20 years ago. But anyway, let's not get into that. And there's a handwritten note above that but dear so here's what Pertwee said. Dear Tony, I do not approve of the poster on 3 accounts. First, Doctor Who is essentially a heroic figure and quite fearless in the face of adversity. This must be the only photo the BBC could have found that shows the Doctor evidently petrified with fear and apprehension, thus presenting an utterly erroneous picture of the character that all his millions of followers have of him. So a picture, if I am to agree to at all, must present him in the light of a bold and fearless man, who is fazed by creatures neither earthly nor unearthly. Secondly, it should be equally possible to find a photograph that does not make me look the 2,000 years old that this poster makes me. I know that I'm supposed to be ageless, but that is the operative word, ageless, i.e. showing no inclination to age. Thirdly, I do not see at the bottom of this poster any indication of my name. This I mentioned before as being of great importance, as the deal you made for me was such a poor one financially. The only advantage I can have, if I am to agree to its publication, is that of publicity. Without the name of John Pertwee, I'm stamping myself even further with the handle of Doctor Who, solely something I have with John Stanley been working very hard to circumvent. I'm now away sailing for 2 weeks, from the 8th of August till the 21st, so I'm out of touch till then. Yours, John. But, well, do you know what? I mean, it is fair enough, and I know I slightly arch in my delivery there, as if I want my name on the thing, but it does sting to me if I do something and a credit is removed or too small or forgotten, and it happens more often than you think, and so actors then have to go, look, can you not list me on that, or can you make sure you spell my name right? That's a big one that I have, and it makes you feel like you're being vain and conceited, but actually you're forced into a position where you have to do it because people screw it up a lot. So I have sympathy for Mr. Pertwee. Ronnie Marsh says, thank you for your memo of the 1st of March, including photostats of the proposed artwork for the annual for world distributors. This seems to be a much higher standard than previously, with the exception of the artwork for pages 2 and 3 is quite acceptable. The producer of the programme informs me that the nose shot is an anathema to John Pertwee. This photograph was taken at our very first photo call, and pictorial publicity were requested to withdraw it. It would seem to me as though it was somehow escaped the net, but we're most anxious to avoid a rift with John Pertwee over this matter. Please convey our apologies to world distributors, but we must request that they do not use this particular piece of artwork. This, we're told by Richard, that they ignored. Yeah, so there we go. There's some good. Barry Letts has a note here on the letter to Charles Leagood. I think it's all excellent, except the likeness of John Pertwee on the Invasion of the Autons cover. Invasion of the Autons, eh? I think the nose is too big and the mouth misplaced and the wrong shape. But other than that, what has Chris Achilles ever done for us? So there we go. That's a load of documents about Pertwee's nose. Thank you very much to Richard Bignell. That's given us a bit of extra content on this colony and space colony. I hope that was of interest to you all, of interest to me. So anyway, I think we should probably, should we not, get on with watching Colony in Space episode 4, because that's what that's what this podcast is all about, and it's probably about time I started watching it with a view to, as you know, if you won't be a stranger around these ear parts, to choosing my favourite thing about it, and TV Doctors guy, not Doctors Who, but Doctors, the daytime soap opera that blooded a lot of new writers and hired a lot of actors, gave a lot of actors work, some several times, playing a number of different parts over the years. And some, it has to be said, there's not even an audition in its long history. But that wasn't Simon's fault. And he did tell me when I moaned about this last time that he actually tried. So I appreciate that. But now the show is gone and I will never have been in Doctors. I was never in the bill either. This is a catalogue of failure, I have to say. But let's not get into that. I mean, I presume that I'm never going to be in the mousetrap then either. But there we go. I'm also not in Colony in Space, but I do know a bit about some of the actors herein, so I'll talk about their illustrious careers rather than fixate upon the shortcomings of mine. So if you would like to watch Colony in Space episode 4 along with me, I would like you to press play in 3, 2, 1. Here we go. Colony in Space, episode 4. Whenever I've watched this story, I've watched it all the way through. And in fact, I did watch this. Yes, I watched this in preparation to this. I didn't actually do episode 6 in the end, so that will be news to me. But the exact activities of episodes 4, 5, and 6 are less come to me with less clarity than episodes 1 to 3, although episodes 1 to 3 had a lot of surprises for me, as I think I announced, like, for example, the Norton subplot appearing much earlier, etc., etc. It does look cold, doesn't it? But it's a very effective rock in the side of the cliff, that, actually. I mean, because obviously that's a piece of set, but it's had to meld in with everything else, and we're still on location there. So actually, well done, Tim Gleeson, because I think the way that rock entrance fits in with the existing edifice of Quarry X, then I think that's done very well. I like this sort of stuff with the primitives, that instead of it being, they're aliens who do this, they have this kind of relationship where they trade food, and they sort of get them to help out, and I don't know, it just makes the world seem sort of real to me a little bit. John Ringham has a real gentleness about him, doesn't he? And he's quite, and the beard actually makes him slightly less recognisable than he often was. I remember seeing him in the Terry's Chocolate Orange advert and going, oh, I know who that guy is. And it was only when I then saw him in Just Good Friends, the sitcom, that I was able to put a name to him. And then, of course, I worked out, in reading Doctor Who books and things like that he was Tlatoxel in the Aztecs, and then was quite surprised to discover the characters, that the other characters later on that he played. I think I found out he was in Colony in Space next, and then discovered that he was in The Smugglers, which is one that sort of goes slightly under the radar because The Smugglers is very little known. This is a great, and I slightly spoiled this for Susie Ferguson, who is a regular listener to these podcasts, who is discovering some of these episodes. Oh, I envy you, Susie, for the first time. So I had suggested that this monster was perhaps not really a monster, but Susie had no reason to believe it was a fake. And it is slightly meta. I know that there was nothing so grandly intended, but it could easily have been a Doctor Who monster that was a bit of projection of some stock footage. Would be a way of, we've all seen those movies as well, haven't we, where the dinosaur is actually was it things like Valley of the Guanji? Did that do that? But there was certainly some sort of movies with faux prehistoric monsters, as people journey to the centre of the earth and do all of that sort of stuff, where sometimes the monster would be a monitor lizard but with something stuck round its neck or something, and then superimposed, because of course that stuff moves more convincingly than stop motion or a puppet or whatever. It has other issues with it. You can't control it as much, but then if that's merged with live action people, it's another inventive way of creating a convincing monster. And what you lose in control, you make up for in convincing movement, and you don't have to do makeup, although they occasionally do. But that's not what's happened here. It's simply a bit. It looks like projection because it is projection. But the idea of a fake monster, I think that's very interesting, especially in this day and age where image manipulation and propaganda and fake news and all of that is something that is used to manipulate people. Faking monsters is something that could be taken out of the 21st century playbook. So here's John Tordoff, who is still around. He's an artist in Cambridge. He's only in this episode, I think, isn't he? Playing the other Leeson. None of this is in the book, I don't think. But I remember being quite surprised that another Leeson appears. I wasn't sure where this was going when I first watched it because I was unfamiliar with it. John Tordoff is an artist now, but he was a very skilled swordsman. I like I like this bit. I like this bit where Dent is sort of, saying to Morgan, "Don't do that," and you think, "Oh, is it because Morgan's no," and then you go, "Well, was Caldwell part of that, or did Caldwell unwittingly help that along by him sort of needling Dent, and then you got Dent needling Morgan, and it's like so if Caldwell was actually being conscience stricken, he'd added to the sort of melee, which meant that the colonists didn't quite know who to look at, which meant that Morgan was able to get his gun. So poor old Caldwell did that goodies thing of actually his goodness sort of screwed things up a little bit. Or it could be that he does it a bit in a little bit where he sort of still cooperates with Dent a bit. So which could mean that he's not as much of a good guy as we might like to think, because he doesn't have quite the backbone that's required at all times. But maybe, it takes him a little bit longer, and it's an honest picture of going, well, just because somebody's essentially changed size once, which he did when he helped Winton, for example, doesn't mean that he's then going to consistently do that. People aren't one note and they vacillate back and forth. So the Adjudicator has arrived, but we've only seen his back so far, so that's all rather exciting. I think that's really nicely done. But it's the Master, and he's got the sexy Master theme. I like the sexy Master theme. It's not very sexy, but it's sexy to me because it reminds me, because I'm familiar with it. That's sexy to me, familiar. If yes, what gets you going, Toby? Something I've already been aware of that I'm not that gives me comfort. Oh, you racy devil. So I think he's got a very powerful nose, John Pertwee. I think his physiognomy is a great tool, because there are some people with a nose that size that probably couldn't quite get away with it because of awkward proportions, but because because of the shape of his face and his height and his style, I think he's a very striking man. But of course, we all have things about our physical appearance that bother us. And I always rejected that idea. I'm much more sympathetic to Mr. Pertwee in those letters now, having seen myself on, repeatedly on DVD things where you think you've covered every angle and dressed properly and done this and that, and something pokes out or something doesn't quite fit, or there's an angle that's not very flattering, and it's there forever, and people sometimes point it out on Facebook. And anyway, at least when you're making television, you have somebody that's got an eye on all of that. But you don't really have the crew for that. But anyway, I rather like this. The sort of cave paintings, but they're futuristic cave paintings. They've been done in space crayon, but this is nice because we're seeing the Doctor and Joe sort of using their intelligence to work out stuff about the creatures, and the conclusion that they reach is they're going to be sacrificed to a furnace, which is not an unreasonable suggestion. I remember seeing pictures of these guys in the Doctor Who monster book. We had a copy of the Doctor Who monster book that I would occasionally misplace in the house and would sometimes have to scour shelves all afternoon. Then I would happen upon it, and then it would get lost again. I actually can't find that copy of it. I do have another copy of it now, but I do hope it's somewhere, because my brother had drawn a moustache onto Donald G. So I hadn't anticipated that these creatures, I think they actually look better in the photographs. I think the wizenedness looks slightly more effective in black and white. But I remember thinking that Colony in Space looked really exciting because it had got... I was never wild about the primitives, but I thought the look of the short priests and the Guardian they did look a bit Star Trek-y, a bit like some of those quite organic-looking creatures that appeared on the closing credits of Star Trek, etc., which always looked a little bit better than Doctor Who monsters because they had higher budgets and they were on film and all of that sort of thing. So certainly the black and white photos made the creatures of this story look very alluring and made it look like not a story of men arguing in a room, but which this is, but actually about really interesting aliens. But of course, the priests don't really say anything, and the Guardian only gets specific scenes of exposition and then disappears from the story again. But I actually like all of this because it's so near. I was watching Halloween, not Halloween, The Fog, recently to do a podcast about it called Smirsh Pod, and one of the things that's really great about that is that you're in mortal danger from midnight till 1. So when it's 5 to 1, you're sort of urging the people to just hang on, don't die for 5 minutes, because that would be even more frustrating than dying at 12:15, because you were so near. And there is something about that. The nearer you are to something to be scuppered, the more pressure on you feel. Actually, if you think, oh, I'm never going to survive an hour, you might just manage it. But if you think, I've got to survive these 5 minutes, you probably overthink it and screw it up. It was a bit like that with the golf game I played with. I'm talking through John Pertwee's magic trick here with the primitive, which he does very well, and the look on his face is very funny. And of course, it's very benign. I think he should have said, "I'm terribly sorry, old chap," but that's quite a fun sequence with the with the coin that he does, and Pertwee sort of works being a conjurer. We're not being asked to think that he has magical powers, as perhaps we were in Ambassadors of Death, but I like the lighting here. It's all nice and alien, although it does suffer that thing of flat, sort of pretty flat and straight up walls in caves that besets. They're all a bit too square, really, aren't they? But that's okay. It's nicely alien, and I like this. I like this look, and I like all these creatures. This is all fun. This is exciting alien fun for Doctor Who. But yes, that. The frustration I'm talking about with it was like the golf game I played with John Levine in the documentary Living with Levine. I wasn't expected to do very well at all, and then I unexpectedly did really, really well, which pissed John off a bit. And I'd done the hard bit, and then I'd only got a couple more bits to go, and I'd have actually won the game, and I screwed those bits up because I suddenly felt the pressure of going, well, I can't believe I've achieved what nobody expected me to achieve, so I better not screw up the easy bit, which of course I did. And that's somehow more frustrating than not having been able to do it in the first. I exceeded my expectations and then lived up to my usual uselessness, and that was almost worse. It's the hope that kills you, says Basil Fawlty, doesn't he? And the reason I've brought all that up is because the colonists had beaten IMC. They'd found the evidence, and it was like, oh, all they've got to do is hang on to the Adjudicator. Even though we didn't, even with the Adjudicator being the master, he is trying to put on a face of reasonableness. And as far as they are concerned, he's the genuine article. So all they needed to do was hang on, and they're just too late. So that's the added frustration of that. And the frustration is partially because, Alec Leeson was banging on there, and Winton's a bit hot-headed as well, and they believe more. A series of sort of very human mistakes that meant that it's grabbing defeat from the jaws of victory, which is, again, more frustrating than just having been downtrodden for the whole time. So I think that's dramatically very effective. And I really do like the way that Captain Dent sort of yells at Morgan, because you sort of totally believe him. Maurice Perry doesn't, act as if he's acting. And it really works. It's another sign of how good these actors are. And I like this. It's a shame you can't quite get the mouth to even do an approximation of fitting in with the voice. It's one of those things you put up with when you watch old telly, and particularly when aliens are voiced by different actors or actors behind masks or whatever. But this is and I think this is more effective than the sort of big head. It's Richard Beale, isn't it, friend of Michael Bryant's, in the Blake 7 episode The Web, where you've got Richard Beale's head sticking out and a sort of small wizened body underneath. But I think this is a puppet, or is this the head sticking through? I should know this. Certainly the voice is Norman Atkins, who is another person that Bryant uses. He's in the Sea Devils as well as the Rear Admiral. Well, I'd have thought if it was a head, you could actually get the proper movement of the mouth. Yes, it's a shame. I should know this. I feel like I've let you down, viewers, because it's a well-known part of Doctor Who. This creature, I should know 100% how it is realised, and I'd assumed it was a puppet, and obviously certainly the arms and the body is a puppet, but it just reminds me a bit of the Blake Seven, the web, where it's definitely Richard Beale's head sticking through a curtain, but with that, you see, you at least get the performance, you at least get the mouth moving and everything, which you don't get there. But I like the design, and I like the sort of creatures that have evolved almost too much, so that they've, he's basically evolved so much that he's the sort of, this wizened creature that is fairly immobile. It makes sense of a sort of slightly immobile monster, although you do wonder what he does the rest of the time. Does he just sit behind that wall waiting for people to visit? Is he watching telly? Is he playing table football? What's he doing? It's another of those things of what happens in the universe outside of this story. Roger Delgado is great, isn't he? And he's very good at playing good, and especially as we know he isn't. I love his reaction that he has to do a little bit of something, and he just sort of breathes through his nose and does a little cough. I mean, I prefer it in the Demons because I love him with his spectacles and his dog collar. But there is something, because he's such a dignified man, there is something great about seeing the Master being absolutely convincing as a good one. Maurice Perry actually said he didn't think Roger Delgado was that good. It's the only person I've known to not be wild about Delgado's performance. But I think Maurice could stick the needle in it sometimes. Well, he could. Yeah, he could. He did. But yeah, I was quite slightly surprised by that. Of course. And he looks good in black as well, doesn't he? It's I love the fact that the Adjudicator's costume is evil coloured, but of course, if it wasn't the Master, it wouldn't necessarily be. And I do like this idea that the Doctor, for all I'm an anarchist, I travel through space and time. I love the fact that the Doctor is confounded by paperwork. That aliens is one thing, his Moriarty is another, evil capitalist mining corporations, but he can't do anything because he's confounded by bureaucracy. Now, of course, the psychic paper, because you wouldn't want that, would be boring to happen all of the time. And I have to say, I used to sometimes get frustrated when reading the Target books that quite often it would take the Doctor a long time to establish his credentials. And you're like, no, we need to get this. We don't want him being locked up while the story goes on without him. We want him to be able to take centre stage and solve the mystery. But I like the way that the Master, instead of having to try and kill him, instead of having him locked up, which he can't do because the Master is slightly hampered by the fact that he has to appear benign and official, he can't just turn around and go, kill that guy. Instead, he has to very reasonably go, and what's your paperwork? Oh, and it's lovely that they favour poor old John Ringham there, to whom this weighs so heavily. Now, this is brilliant. I love this. I don't know if this is Malcolm Hulke or if this is the actors and the director who've gone, let's have them drunk. Of course they might be. I suspect this is something that was worked out in rehearsal. And certainly it could have been, they're having a celebratory drink. But they've decided to make them slightly pissed, and you don't have that. Sorry, American listeners, pissed means drunk, means discombobulated by alcohol, whereas you mean cross. We would say pissed off, whereas if you're just pissed, you're hammered, you're drunk. So yes, Winton's being hot-headed again. I mean, I don't quite know why Ash, when Winton was saying, come on, mate, we need to do this, he says, just leave it, Winton. Again, it seemed a little bit like he'd given up too easily. Now, I understand that it's because Winton had screwed it up by, ambushing IMC and doing all of that. But I still think he should have fought a little bit harder. But I actually really do buy. They're not like Salamar and Wyszynski here, are they? Where it's too sort of bickery. I think Ash kind of knows that that Winton has a point, and Winton has some sympathy for Ash. So even though we need them to be against each other, and quite often they're at cross purposes, there is a respect between the two of them there. They just have different ideas about how to do things, and I think that's much more interesting than people being inexplicably against each other, or rubbing each other up the wrong way. But I like this Captain Dent, because they've got pissed. Captain Dent's fallen asleep. I think it adds. It's a word I've been ribbed for overusing on occasion, but I think it adds verisimilitude to proceedings. And because we don't see alcohol in Doctor Who very much, but it's also this doesn't lead to well done, Morris. There going, I'm just trying to clear my head, and that reminds me of hangovers. But it doesn't. This isn't in there because and we were able to take over the IMC ship because they were drunk. These are just. It's just a little grace note into proceedings that gives the actors something more interesting to do, that gives the scene a different energy, and that makes it more realistic. And I love whosever decision it was to make them a little bit hammered. And I like this idea that we have here. I think this is really cleverly plotted, because the Master, you go, what has found in favour of IMC, and you think, that's because they're the baddies and he's a baddie. But of course that wouldn't be very realistic, would it? Because he's not a baddie like their baddies. He doesn't want the baddies to succeed because he doesn't really care. He's the Master. This little fight doesn't really interest him. And I suppose we think, and on a kiddies level, you go, well, yeah, the Master will side with IMC because they're both baddies. But actually, it's a little bit more sophisticated than that. The Master has sided with IMC. John Tordoff was, by the way, in Citizen Smith as well. But Derek Ware chose him for a production of Romeo and Juliet at the Ludlow Festival to play either Samson or Gregory, who are the guys at the very beginning who have a sword fight, because he said John Tordoff was an excellent swordsman. So that's how I know that about John Tordoff. But Alec Leeson is dead, so that's terrible. The two Leeson brothers have died within 4 episodes of each other. The Leesons have been wiped out, but presumably, let's keep John Leeson safe at home. It's odd seeing Roy Skelton looking so svelte as well. He's in good shape there. So the whole I could probably talk through this because it's another. Actually, that outside, it's just a photo blow up, isn't it? So that's the end of the Norton subplot, but that was a good subplot. I like that. It worked well and added another level of malignancy. And I do like these machine guns, and the microphony, which is the Venetian blind effect, isn't too bad here, because the gunfire could interfere with cameras. It was one of those compromises you just had to make in the 70s. Go, well, if we want machine gun fire, it has to interferes with the picture. But I believe there are ways to reduce that now, but that's for another time. I want to talk about. It's going to be the end of the episode. I like that. Yes, the Master has. Yes, so there's the Doctor and Joe are going to be killed by stray bullets. Is not a bad cliffhanger there. Although, why is it Roger Delgado gets second billing? He is still considered a lead over Joe Grant, Katie Manning. But I'm not fond of Master instead of the Master. I think you need the definite article. I was quite surprised when I saw them do that in. Occasionally in Pertwee Who Master. It's not always Master, is it? Sometimes it's the Master, which I think is much better. So listen. Anyway, I still feel very guilty that I did. Oh yes, and Roy Heyman's the other alien priest who is who we see later in Death to the Daleks, playing Belal's mate. Yes, I like the actually the reason the Master's sided with IMC is not because he is a fellow baddie like they are. It's so that he's able to say to the colonists, well, look, if there's an area of historical significance, which is a thing we could completely understand, because that makes absolute sense to us in our in our 20th century, 21st century terms, without it seeming like too quaint and homespun. You can imagine that happening in the future. That's a perfectly reasonable thing to do, to say, well, okay, we can't exploit this planet because it has something of historical or cultural significance that is unique, so therefore it can't be dug up and exploited for money. And so I think the fact that that's what the Master uses as his reason to try and see if he can plead the colonists' case, which of course he's not interested in doing. He doesn't care about the colonists' case, but he knows that the colonists are more likely to be able to have access to use that to plead their own case. And in pleading their own case, they give him the information that he needs, which is about the ancient civilization whose doomsday weapon he is trying to get. So I think that's really cleverly plotted. I think that's really smart because we can understand it in our own terms, but it makes the Master siding with the IMC actually a bit more manipulative and a bit less obvious than it might at first appear. And I just think that's very clever. And I would have chosen that because I think it's a smart and subtle idea that is, very cleverly woven into the plot. I do like the way that Dent tells Morgan to stop betraying him when he's not really betraying him. They're just distracting the colonists, because I just like the way that the actors all do that. I like the Master's reaction to the Doctor and Joe coming in, and he has to suddenly be very careful about how he's playing. He's just enjoying playing the good guy, and then there's a slight fly in his ointment, which I rather like. But no, for me, it has to be the fact. And I say this as somebody who no longer drinks, and indeed it's a bit more serious than that. I like the fact, and I have got very pissed with one of those actors, Bernard Kay and I, on more than one occasion, and my God, he could drink like a fish, and he didn't, unlike Maurice Perry did there when he was trying to clear his head. Didn't get hangovers. Bernard Kay, he was a man who could drink like a fish and then function very clearly, whereas Maurice was actually not that much of a drinker. And in fact, I went to the pub with Maurice, and he was kind of a bit sort of like, oh yes, I'm not really one for doing that to that extent. So that was very interesting, seeing as he and Bernard were quite similar in many ways and were friendly and socialised. Maurice was not a big sitting in the pub drinking away sort of chap. But yeah, I like the alcohol scene. I like what it adds without it becoming a point, without it being there for earth-shattering reasons. It's just there to add texture, to give the performers something more interesting to do, to make the scene more believable, to make it more relatable. And it's unusual for Doctor Who as well, because you rightly don't see too much use of alcohol in the show. So, yes, says the recovering alcoholic who doesn't really think that alcohol should... But mine is purely my own personal issue, so it's not something I'm not like I am a reformed smoker, but a lot of reformed smokers are famously the ones most anti-smoking. But no, I'm not saying we should encourage everyone to have a drink, but I also know that most people can do it perfectly responsibly and it not ruin anybody's life. However, what it can do is it can make a scene much more interesting. And so I'm choosing the drunk celebration of IMC as my favourite. It's a Doctor Who. It's a Doctor Who episode that's got a small alien puppet creature. That's very good as well. I do like the Guardian. A myriad aliens. Clever plotting, excellent characters, good actors, machine gun fights, and I like the bit where the men get drunk. I do. I just like it. I think it's a really, really nice touch. What has Simon chosen as his favourite thing of episode 4?
My favourite thing about episode 4 of Colony in Space is the direction of Michael E. Bryant. I've already mentioned the Sea Devils for part 3, which he also directed, so there are links going on here. What I like about this episode particularly are some of the shot crafting, which are beautifully constructed. Joe going into the caves with the light and the darkness, the reveal of the Master, Winton on the phone with the 3 IMC people lined up in the back of shot, shooting through the cave pictures with the Doctor and Master on the other side, the action sequence in the caves. My favourite shot's the two-shot of the Doctor and the Master when they go into the side room, as the Master keeps his back to the Doctor while he talks. They're repeated later on with Ash and Winton. The cliffhanger, the Master sidling into shots. We think the Doctor has a plan. Great visuals all round, so can't forget the camera operator, Peter Hall, of course. But great directing, and Michael Bryant is therefore my favourite thing about episode 4.
Thank you, Simon. You told me you were going to make this easy for me, and I did have an inkling you might choose Michael Bryant at some point, but I didn't know which episode. And I think I did have an inkling you might choose it for this episode, and I should have gone for something more obvious. But in fact, it's a bit like me playing golf with John Levine. I put myself under so much pressure. Go, well, it should be easy because he said he was going to be easy, so he's probably going to choose the cast, the writer, the director, the Doctor, or whatever. And I've just gone with my own instinct, because you can double guess. I'd be annoyed if I put myself under too much pressure and then instead of going for the thing I wanted to, went for something else and then ended up getting caught out for that reason. So I had a thought you might, and I think Michael Bryant does do a really good job. I think he is a really interesting director. He's not quite in the same league in terms of, aesthetically as a Ferguson or a Camfield, who I think do my style of Doctor Who particularly well, the style that I like, where it's sort of gritty and gripping and action-packed and atmospheric. But he does do really good visuals. He's excellent at casting. He does interesting left field avant-garde things that usually sort of work. And as you say, the picture composition, all of those moments that you mentioned and shooting through bits of the set and all that are excellent. And Peter Hall, you mentioned, is of course the film cameraman, so he's only responsible for the images on film. But the film work, seeing as it's a bleak quarry, is always with the film work as Doctor Who is that they seem to be quite ambitious with it. But I think Mike Bryant was 24 or something ridiculous when he directed this. He was young anyway, and it was his first proper job, and I think he's doing a really good job on it. So I think he does deserve a mention, but he won't be getting one from me because you've already chosen him, which means I'm going to have to be really, really I'm going to have to dig quite deep for what I choose for episodes 5 and 6, aren't I? But I wanted to choose the drink, so I did. It's not something I do very often, but tonight I've chosen a drink. So let's toast to episode 4 of Colony in Space. You can all have a glass of wine. I will have a cup of, I have tea, Earl Grey. Not too hot. I don't have the most robust of mouths, but if you know to what I'm alluding there, you'll know it's a totally different science fiction series. But anyway, whatever your tipple, I think we should toast Michael Bryant for sure, but also so much else about what many people think is quite a humdrum instalment of a humdrum story. But there's always something to perk you up about any episode of Doctor Who if only you want to look hard enough, and I think that's definitely the case. So for once, I'm going to say I'll drink to that. Thanks very much for listening to Happy Times and Places, which is presented by me, Toby Haydock, and my special guest, Simon Curtis. I'm grateful to Simon and to the patrons who make these podcasts possible, and they include Ruben Herfindahl, Stephen Moffat, Peter Harness, Rob Leonard, Richard Straw, Neil Tate, Nick Tedston, Peter Crocker, John Deere, Chris Dunford-Kelk, Jason Gorman, Ian Key, Joe Llewellyn, Barry Platt, Risto Matti Sarillo, Peter Adamson, Peter Burns, Rick Byatt, Alex Kafajoglu, Paul Carnahan, Andy Case, Richard Chalk, Gary Gillett, Andrew Jordan, Guy Lambert, James Lark, David Matthewman, Rossa McPhillips, Stuart Mitchell, Nathan Moore, Matthew Newton, Melvin Pena, Jonathan Potter, Dylan Rees, Matt Sawyer, Keith Say, Sabrina Tirabassi, Apollo C. Vermouth, Gary Wales, Adam Westwood, Michael Williams, and Stephen White. The music is by Dave Gates and the artwork by Dylan Patterson. If you too would like to become a patron, you can go to patreon.com/Toby Haydoke, and for as little as £3 a month, as mentioned earlier, you can get advanced releases, exclusive AMAs, and exclusive podcasts as well, plus looks at my archive and behind-the-scenes material from all of the DVD and Blu-ray extras I do, and other things that I get up to in the wild and varied Hooniverse. So go there, and I work hard, and you get everything at the lowest possible tier, which is £3. The tiers do go up. It's a sort of pay what you can, pay what you want kind of affair. You can also go to kofi.com/Toby Haydoke if you just want to do a one-off donation every now and again without any monthly commitment and without emails from me, things sort of clogging up your timeline. But you can support these in other ways too, by going to YouTube and signing up and thumbsing up and subscribing to my channel and clicking on as many videos as you can. But you can also get these podcasts on, Spotify and Apple and iTunes and all the places that you get podcasts. Wherever you're listening to it now, basically, there is a way of giving these 5 stars and a few lines of review and liking and subscribing, and all that stuff really, really helps. So please do that, because that costs you nothing but a little bit of your time, and it would be time well spent on my behalf, and I'd be extremely grateful. And we all waste our time on the internet, particularly on social media. I certainly do. I'm there all the time, and in many different forms. So you can find me on Twitter at Toby Haydoke and at Haydoke Podcasts, also on Blue Sky, and also on Instagram at Toby.Haydoke. I have a Facebook page, and again, that YouTube channel. I'd love it if you could like and subscribe to that, and pay my website a visit, www.tobyhaydoke.com. Is it com or co.uk? I can't remember. .com, I think. You'll find it. I must get better at this. That's it. I would love to do a post-credits sequence for you, but I've had a stressful week of losing my laptop, and I need to get up early tomorrow in order to go to London and get it back. So, but I'd like to release this for patrons before I do that, so that they've got something to keep them going over the weekend, because the weekend beckons. I'm going to spend it watching Terror of the Zygons at the BFI. That is when this was recorded, just a couple of days before Terror of the Zygons and Chris Chapman's Ian Martyr documentary are shown at the BFI. By the time this goes out to non-patrons, I suspect season 13's Blu-ray will be old news, and you'll have devoured all the goodies on that. But as I record this, it's yet to be seen. I've been fortunate enough to see quite a lot of it, and indeed be in quite a lot of it, and indeed doing something on there with the director of Colony in Space, Michael Bryant, who is now in his 80s and is sprightly and sharp and as brilliant as ever. So I better go and put the finishing touches to this, because I've still got to edit it together and add the music and the fancy bits and bobs. So that's all you're getting for the post credits, which is frankly more than is necessary. And in fact, I'm going to add to the more than is necessary by more than necessary by then saying, but it's nice to do something because I like to do something for the people that listen right to the end, but I don't really know why you do. But anyway, so it's a mixture of more material than is required, a soupçon of self-laceration to somehow justify the unnecessary verbosity and self-indulgence of this, that if I hadn't done in the first place, I wouldn't need to lacerate myself for, so therefore it should cancel itself out and I should just shut up. So I'm going to do that now.